Welcome to the Lean AI podcast, where we're flipping the AI conversation on its head by focusing on holistic strategies and tactics that drive AI adoption, rather than focusing solely on overcoming the technical challenges of AI. In every Season 1 episode of the Lean AI podcast, we talk with corporate AI leaders just like you, who've uncovered secrets of driving successful AI adoption with far less wasted time and investment. Our guests challenge established views and offer disruptive perspectives, providing new actionable insights. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lean AI podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting Jonathan Bertfield, a senior director here at Lean Startup Co. With over 20 years of experience, Jonathan is a seasoned expert in driving innovation and developing products across diverse industries. We'll find out a little bit about those industries during the interview. His expertise spans global corporations, early stage startups, and massive government agencies, where he has served as a consultant, coach, trainer, and workshop facilitator. At Lean Startup Co., Jonathan focuses on building and delivering programs that develop organizational capacity for innovating at scale using Lean Startup and Lean AI principles. Before joining Lean Startup Co., Jonathan held key roles at Pearson, where he helped build the company's innovation practice, and at Sesame Street, where he contributed to the education business. He has also advised renowned companies such as Nissan, MasterCard, Citibank, Marriott, and Microsoft, and worked with both the US and UK governments. Jonathan's deep experience in building innovation systems within large corporations and his passion for fostering agile, customer-centric cultures make him an invaluable resource for organizations looking to thrive in the digital age and specifically in the space of AI. Welcome, Jonathan. Pleasure to have you on the show.
Hey, Ben. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So let's start off with just maybe giving our listeners a flavor for the types of AI-powered products and services that you've helped companies with over the past 5+ years. If you can give us a flavor for the types of industries and maybe the use cases that you've helped companies with.
Yeah, well, it's obviously emerged as front and center for a lot of companies over the last 12 months, maybe a little bit showing itself in the prior years, but it's really become central to everyone's strategic vision. Let's make sure we include and let's make sure we tap into the value of AI pretty much for everything we're doing. So over the last period of time, a lot of companies operating in the telecom space, some companies operating in logistics, in the automotive space, financial services. There's really no consistent theme in terms of the domains that these companies are in. It's really an opportunity for them to add value, to sometimes keep pace with competitors, sometimes to outpace competitors. We're really thinking about how can we grow our portfolio of products and how can we maximize revenue and impact opportunities because we can leverage AI technologies to drive our products and services forward.
And you said it's kind of industry agnostic. Can you say more about that? Are you saying there's kind of a general set of principles that you can use to deploy AI? It's not necessarily industry specific.
I think that's true. I think there are dynamics that sometimes become industry specific because of the nature of the work that they're doing. But certainly the principles of how can we take a body of knowledge and how can we inject that in different ways into the value stream that our customers are operating against, that's certainly consistent. There's some specific dynamics in terms of governance and in terms of ethics in different areas that show themselves in different ways. But the principle of we're going to take a data set that we own or we have access to, and we're going to translate that into value in ways that reduces our cost of labor, increases our time to impact, keeps our customers happy and engaged with the experience. All of those are pretty agnostic, regardless of the kinds of industry you're in. We want our customers to be happy. We want them to keep coming back, and we want them to keep delivering whatever our impact is defined as. Sometimes that's revenue, sometimes that's engagement, sometimes that's loyalty. But in all of those cases, the core principle is how do we get more data, more value into the hands of our customers faster?
Well, let's just jump in then. I mean, you've worked with dozens of companies, over the past few years in this space, and many large companies are doing a lot of ideation. They have a lot of ideas for how to apply AI. There's a lot of proofs of concept, but very little actual adoption among users and customers for AI-powered products. So what's driving that? What are some of the impediments that you see out there where companies just aren't really getting to adoption?
Yeah, so I think the biggest impediment to adoption is really making sure that the value that is being delivered is meaningful for the customer, for the end user, and not just for the business owner who is driving forward a new set of services, new set of tools, and looking to be able to say, "Hey, we've got AI mixed into our portfolio in a meaningful way." So the biggest impediment is assuming there is a really viable use case for the particular AI technology in the environment that that business happens to be operating in, without really taking the time, doing the work, and really revealing where the value lies. So those companies that struggle have pushed ahead really aggressively. Important. Sometimes you want to be first mover, and sometimes you want to have those products in the hands of customers early. But where they've struggled is if they're trying to do so without really understanding whether the experience is of value down the chain. So not just on the marketing copy, but also in the overall experience that customers, wherever they sit, happen to be needing.
And I mean, when we talk about lean, it's all about achieving the desired result, in this case, adoption, whether it's external customers, internal users for internal workflows, with a minimal amount of wasted time and effort. Where are you seeing the most waste in terms of time, investment, employee engagement in this space right now?
Okay, so one of the common dynamics where there's low adoption is where we're talking about a data-rich experience without bringing a experience-rich experience, right? So what I mean by that is there's tons of data. There's a good opportunity to access knowledge in the form of the LLM that's kind of sits behind the AI interface, but little thought given to how do these particular users that we're focused on, how do they get access to that? And so the more companies start investing in really kind of service design around the delivery of that value, the more they start to see the benefits coming to the end users. So a lot of waste is when companies are, building products that are really solutions in search of a problem, and they're putting into the hands of customers solutions and experiences that don't take into account what the user really cares about and where the current friction points are in their workflow, rather than in the guesses about their workflow that aren't actually true for the customer in reality.
So we've talked a little bit about where the waste is. So when it comes to applying lean to the AI space, what are some of the best practices that you see out there that can really help companies to drive adoption with a minimal amount of wasted time and effort?
Yeah, so I think it starts with really understanding the strategy for the company. What are you trying to do, big picture? And where are there opportunities for you to inject AI into that mix, right? So the work that is being done that is contributing to the overall strategic goals of the organization, there's lots of opportunity there to really understand how it's relevant, how we can invest, how we can really dedicate some resources. So as long as we have a strategy, not always the case, and that's always sometimes a challenge, but as long as we have a strategy, we can say, where does AI fit into it? Then we can make a lot of choices and decisions about how we invest in AI along the way and keep ourselves aligned to what we're trying to do. If we just go off the rails and we're just implementing AI that is not aligned to our strategic vision, then we start getting into trouble, because it takes time, takes investment, takes resources away from what it is that we're really trying to do. So start internally, like, what is it that we care about? Where do we want to operate? Where do we want to add value to the markets that we're going after? And then I think the second step that's really important is understanding where the gaps are, where the friction is in the customer's usage and the customer's workflow. So that also, we don't want to rush too quickly into making assumptions. Most of the companies that we have the good fortune of working with tend to be market leaders. They tend to be experienced companies who've got a lot of products in the market. And what that does is sometimes it gives them a sense of hubris that we know where the challenges are. And it really comes down to thinking about, is our understanding of our customer challenge still in play when we're thinking about the injection of potential AI? Does the friction that we may have seen previously, does it lend itself to some smoothing out, some additional value, some extra speed that the customer would really care about? So doing that work to understand the customer as part of that early discovery is really critical. We don't want to jump in again to building a solution hoping that we're solving a problem. Let's really identify what is a customer problem that we want to solve for.
So before we get into maybe some of the more specifics around, what teams do, thinking about a portfolio of use cases, how to think about governance of a portfolio of use cases, could you give us some examples of how applying lean principles in a larger corporation plays out, some anonymized stories of how that works?
Yeah, for sure. So two examples come to mind. So the first is in the logistics space. So an organization we worked with who have technologies that support companies that have large numbers of hardware products, mobile hardware products, etc. Sometimes vehicles, other times other types of hardware that their customers are tracking. And one of the key value adds for that product is, what's the usage of that hardware look like? How are the end users, not necessarily the purchasers within the company, but the end users who are driving or using the machinery, what are they doing? And how does that help us as a company understand? Sometimes that's procurement decisions, sometimes that's maintenance decisions, sometimes it's even personnel and HR related decisions. How do we extract enough data to support the reports, et cetera, that we need to make those decisions? So AI can play a huge role in that, because generally what we're dealing with, masses of data. How do we synthesize it into something actionable that can quickly get into the hands of the right user in the ecosystem without having to go through a lot of BI manipulation and other tools to generate reports? Like, how can we speed up that workflow? So it's a great example because there's an obvious friction, tons of data that's hard to access. There's another point of friction, which is takes a specialized resource to get the insights out of that data. And then there's a third friction, which is timeliness, right? How do you do those things as quickly as possible so you can act on it? So really well set up for, like, hey, this is a problem that needs a specific solution, and AI fits really well. And it's in support of, in this case, the larger strategy of the company, which is we want to drive loyalty and engagement. And so we don't want our customers to be churning out for the latest piece of hardware that's coming out from competitors. And we really want to build in a lot of value about the experience that is just as important as the hardware purchase. So strategically aligned, real problem to solve. Therefore, let's think about how we could apply AI in that space. And I'll talk a little bit more in terms of when we get to best practices, but the goal there was a non-BI business intelligence user can generate a report that they can act on. They can act on really quickly, regardless of where they sit in the functional hierarchy in the organization.
I really like that example because it ties in both strategy and friction. And I really loved what you said at the beginning about, it's not just data technology rich thing, it's about experience rich, right? Is it a compelling experience for a user, for a customer? So it sounds like a really interesting use case that fits that mold as well.
Yeah, it really is. And one of the things that is a common problem that the Lean AI framework really helps work through for that particular type of challenge is it's much less about, can the technology generate the right data, the right information, the right actionable reports. It's much less about the technical side of it than what does the customer need to do? How do we get the end user to a place where we're actually delivering value? And while both of those have a certain level of uncertainty and risk about them, can the technology do what it needs to do, and can the user work through that experience? It's the user side of it that has shown itself in this particular case to be kind of one of the key challenges. So Lean AI is super helpful in focusing a lot of energy on quickly and iteratively understanding the user interaction with that experience and driving solution path that is already responsive to not just what we might have assumed at the beginning about this is the best way to generate a report, but really how are real people who really are interacting with this with whatever level of technical experience they have able to get some value out of it.
And it's such a problem with technology-driven innovation in general that, quite frankly, you and I have seen for years where people get enamored with just the technology and forget that there's humans involved. And so it's been a problem with blockchain and drones and 3D printing. And it's true now with AI. We've just kind of forgotten the lessons of the past as a community of executives and product developers. And so Lean AI is really also about bringing those lessons from the past to bear from pre-AI and saying, hey, when it comes to technology-driven innovation, let's make sure that we're not just solely focused on the technology and that there's humans involved who need to get value out of the offer.
So another great example that is showing itself to be quite a common scenario is how do we use AI to improve the experience and reduce the costs around customer service, right? So we've got a lot of data around what are the kinds of questions that our customers ask. We've got a lot of data around what are the kind of responses that we need. How do we make sure that our users are getting what they actually need, which is quick answers to their problems? And we're not delivering a second-rate experience in terms of really understanding what are some of the deep experiences that our customer support are used to offering. So this was in the context of a telecom provider. So they've got a lot of customers who are calling about things like modem issues, things like service and billing issues, right? So there's quite a wide range of content areas, but there's a fairly narrow set of responses at that first level. So how do we make sure that we inject the right knowledge into that workflow so that the customers are getting what they need and we can look at it and say, okay, we're actually getting only at the second level of support, we're getting really important questions there that are too hard for that first level service support to respond to. We're really funneling the right things to the right people so that we can take advantage of their expertise.
So now that we've gone through a couple of examples of the types of things that you can apply Lean AI to, what are the essential Lean AI practices that you've discovered over the past couple of years? And by Lean AI, of course, we mean how do you drive adoption? How do you drive value to customers and users with a minimum amount of wasted time and investment?
We build on a lot of the same practices that were part of our overall lean startup approach, right? Which is we really want to take incremental steps towards an opportunity that build on a body of evidence that is emerging over time, right? So we're really learning about the nature of the problem before we start validating whether there's a solution. We're really thinking about, does the solution have legs and have an opportunity to be deployed before we start thinking about how do we scale and market and grow the business, right? So those core ideas remain. Some of the best practices in the specific context of Lean AI that I think are really important. So one is about the team. So what we've seen is traditionally, and I say traditionally meaning kind of over the last decade or so of really thinking about digital products and being lean and driving transformation in terms of the products and services that we build, the core idea has been we want a small, slimmed down, dedicated team. You know, if we talk about like the triad, right, where you've got a product, a business, and either a UX person or a service design person, right? And so we've got the necessary components to think about the customer and think about the emerging solution. And what we see in AI activity and AI product and services is that we need to expand that small core team quite early on, right? So it's really important that we have some technical expertise engaged basically from day one, right? We don't want to wait before we build in some data experience, some AI experience until we've kind of taken multiple steps down the line, because the kinds of questions that we're asking about whether this customer will find this valuable, whether this opportunity will have legs, demands a different set of questions. It demands us thinking about some of the different dynamics that AI brings. And I'm thinking here about stuff like data quality, right? Where is the data coming from? And how can we ensure that it is lined up with the level of quality that we need? Those kinds of questions about data quality, we really need machine learning expertise early on rather than relying on straight product or business experience. And then another additional component, and it's really a layer of expertise, we want to make sure that we've got, in addition to when we talk about UX, user experience, design, support in that triad, we want to make sure we've got somebody who has a good understanding of what an AI user experience is that's different from a digital user experience. Because there are many differences in terms of how users are going to be interacting with and the kinds of value that they're going to be getting out of that product or service. So we want to make sure that that level of expertise is built in early on. And that's often a challenge because of what that means is instead of having 2 or 3 people on the team on day one, sometimes we've got 4, 5, 6 people. So we've got to understand the implications of that in terms of resourcing, in terms of budget, in terms of opportunity cost and where those people are deployed. So that's something to take into account as a best practice. Make sure you've got the right people on the team. And a second best practice, which is really important, is thinking about how are we going to make decisions moving forward as we ask and answer a series of questions. So the questions that we're asking in terms of AI follow the same kind of inquiry-driven approach that we have with overall lean approach, which is we want to ask a series of questions which help us build that body of evidence early, focused on is there value to the customer? Over time, we're thinking about is there value to the business, and then is there value to is there a growth hypothesis that we can validate? So we're asking certain questions that support our understanding of that body of evidence. We want to shift the questions just a little bit. So we're asking questions about things like ethics. Are there any ethical challenges that we need to anticipate in the context of this experience? That's a very different type of question than we're used to asking and answering in a, let's call it a standard non-AI digital product. We don't generally even think about that, right? Sometimes we have to think about it down the line, but it's an obscure question if we're not talking about AI, but it's a really central question to think about in the context of AI. Are we going to be doing something with the data that demands us to take into account what our ethical guidelines are in terms of how we might be responding, how we might be generating content and an experience? I'll just give you one example there. I talked about the logistics. So if one of the reports is talking about how a vehicle has been driven and the behavior of the driver over a period of time, if one of the reports is leading to HR implications, right? There could be a sanction involved. There could be some penalty associated with that for that particular user. How accurate does that data need to be? Who's going to be consuming it? How much of an audit trail is associated with that type of content? That's a very challenging question early in the process, but it's a really important one to think about. Who needs to be involved? When do we need to bring in legal? When do we need to bring in HR? What are the kinds of questions and assumptions we need to validate in the context of that potential ethical challenge that we can anticipate is coming? So we're really thinking about a different level and approach to governance than we might have had in a straight digital product. I'll give you one more, which is really thinking about how we validate the overall experience. So one of the things that is a pretty common pattern in a lean iterative environment where we're validating, does this solution offer value to our customers? And we can measure that in certain ways, right? Do we see these certain outcomes that we've identified? Do we see those emerge when the user engages with the product or service? Do they get from point A to point B and therefore they're able to do the thing that they were hoping to do? Great. Like we always want to design experiments that can measure that and that can tell us whether that outcome was delivered. When we're thinking about AI, it's sometimes a little bit obscured by the overall experience, whether the value actually meets the customer's expectations. Did the report that was generated show the right content, right? Did it show it at the right level in order to support the overall experience? And so often what we're seeing is we're injecting an expert review rather than just a user review as a way to understand, did we reach the right threshold? So we're looking at an output generated by the AI, and we're asking an expert to review it and evaluate, does this add up to what the expectation should be for this type of experience? And we can't always see that from if we're running a pilot and we've got a bunch of users who are using the experience, whether that's in the call center example or logistics example, where they're generating reports. We can't always see whether the problem or the value is being generated simply because people use or stop. We have to look at the quality of the output and say, is that good enough? We really have to be anticipating who are the SMEs that we need to bring in, when we need to roll them into the process, and what are the kinds of outputs that they're generating to help us really confirm that we have the kind of experience that we need to deliver at scale.
Well, this is amazing. I mean, we've talked about the difference in teams. We always talk about small cross-functional teams. We're saying in the space of lean AI, it's a little different, right? We've talked about some of the milestones or the questions that might be a little bit different in the space of AI. We've talked about governance and also even just running experiments. It's not just with users or customers. There's also a level of expert level experiments where we're trying to evaluate, is this the right level of data and insights to be giving to our users or our customers? So that's great. Any other best practices in the space of portfolio, funnel management, KPIs, anything else that you could share with our listeners?
I think when we talk about a portfolio of products and services, the unit of work that we're normally talking about in the context of a digital portfolio is the product, is the service that is being created. And sometimes that's revenue or it's a feature level. We're thinking about things moving through a life cycle that are at the product level. And in the context of AI, often what we're thinking about is a portfolio of use cases. So we've got a platform, we've got a framework within which the data or the experience can be generated. And we're trying to see not just does the platform deliver value, because at a certain level, the customer doesn't care about the platform. They don't care about the framework within which the value is being delivered. They don't often even know that it exists, right? They're just looking at, do I get the right report? Do I get the right answer in the customer support context, right? They're just looking at the outcome. Does it meet my needs, right? But when we're building AI solutions, it's often a collection of use cases that adds up to the overall value that supports and justifies building the overall platform. So we've got a bit of a chicken and egg, right? Sometimes we have to build a platform with the capability of multiple use cases being exposed in that platform, and then finding out whether those use cases are delivering value, right? And so we want to be careful that we don't invest a ton of time, money, and resource in creating a platform and then starting to think about the use cases. Because we could build a platform, looks good, seems to be doing its job, but we can't find a use case that actually our customers care about and they're willing to expose more value to our organization. They're driving better usage. They're staying more loyal because of those use cases. So we need to think about the timing of those things in a slightly different way, right? And the sequencing of those things. So what's the smallest amount of platform that we can build? Can we leverage a third-party platform? Can we mock something up that isn't quite as good as we need to be? But it gives us the opportunity to really validate one or more use cases that can then give us confidence to say, okay, if we then go to the next level on the platform side, we've already got a start of an understanding of what are the use cases that are going to be the first parts of that portfolio. And we've got a strong sense of validation that there really is some value here that justifies building the overall platform at the really robust level. We see this, just to finish out this thought, we see this in terms of data quality. The platform is the driver of where is the data being ingested, how is it then being presented to the user, and the different ways in which the user extracts their particular slice of that data we can think of as the use case. I need this report in this environment to be able to give me this information. That's a use case that relies on the overall platform. But the challenge is, in order to give them the right information, we need to have a really robust platform that takes the data and ingests it and then spits it out in the appropriate way. So how can we simulate that? What's a proxy for that platform that can give us the confidence? Let's build that suboptimal experience in terms of the back end so that we can validate the front end and therefore move forward. And then once we've got one or two under our belt, then we can say, now we've got confidence to build a platform and start testing out additional use cases in that context.
Yeah, such an important point. And, it's about balancing platform development and use case testing. And what keeps me up at night is, the fact that we have executives that are out there in big companies who are focused solely on platform development. And they're going to do that for the next couple of years and spend a lot of money. And then at the end of those 2 years, maybe test a couple use cases on that platform and find out there's no adoption. Nobody's using those implementations, those deployments, and then they're going to panic. And so I guess anything that we can do as a lean AI movement to help communicate the importance of testing use cases early and often while still doing platform development is a win. So Jonathan, we've talked a lot about some of the best practices, and you just mentioned a collection or a portfolio of use cases. What are some of the KPIs that you'd recommend companies use to evaluate the performance of a collection of use cases as they go through an innovation funnel?
One of the most important drivers for why AI might become part of the overall portfolio and the overall business, the solutions in a business, is speed. We want to move as quickly as possible to deliver whatever it is that we're trying to deliver so that our customers who are busy, who have ton of other stuff going on that they're distracted with, that they see value in this experience because they're able to move quicker. They're able to get to that value more quickly. So time to value is a really important metric that's starting to emerge as something that is being consistently used, where we're saying from the starting point of an inquiry, right? Like, I need a report X. How much faster can we get that into their hands than if they were using some third-party tool and they were going through a whole bunch of steps associated with generating a report? Can we get that report into their hands so that they can then make a decision substantially quicker? If it's 5% quicker, then the heavy lift associated with both us building and then getting used to an environment of where AI exists, that's a bad equation. So we really want to make sure we're getting a substantial increase in the metric. And so in this case, we want to see a really substantial increase in the speed of getting the value into their hands. So time to value is often how we phrase it. And we want to see an understanding of what's the time today, right? What's our baseline? What are we trying to beat? And then measure. And as we run experiments, a lot of our focus is going to be how can we increase that? How can we optimize that experience so that we're getting the value into the hands of the user much faster? Another one that it's not a new metric, right, but it's really important in this context is engagement. How much engagement do we see from our users when the experience in front of them is shifted to more of an AI environment? A clear example of this is when we are faced with the decision about how open-ended should a chatbot Gen AI experience be for users, right? So I'll go back to the logistics and the report experience. We're making a trade-off here. If a user is really accomplished, they will be really engaged by knowing all the right engineering, the right prompts they can put in to generate the outputs. right? But most of our users that we see in most corporate environments, in most business users, are not really accomplished at knowing what those are. So they get frustrated when they have a really open-ended experience because they don't know how to get the most value out of whatever it is that they're trying to generate. And the trade-off, what we see often is if we add a lot of pre-canned prompts into the flow, the trade-off is we're constraining the value because we're saying we know where the experience is going to be most valuable, either because we've seen it through testing or we're making some solid assumptions based on prior reports. So we're going to constrain the experience with an expectation that users will engage more with that approach because there's less work for them to do. There's less thinking for them to do. They're not being put to word and thinking, how do I word this especially right so that I get what I need? And so the engagement metric there is really important. When users come to that space and they're confronted with a very broad, open-ended prompt entry field, how does that compare to canned responses where they've got a pre-existing set of prompts? Do they get better value out of that? And we can't always assume that it obviously will be better one or the other, but the metric that we're really focused on there is engagement. Are users engaging with the experience? Despite our enthusiasm, despite our excitement about it, does the opportunity really deliver them value? And they're going to be engaged if it does, and they're going to abandon if it doesn't.
Key insights that you would share with corporate AI executives, kind of top 3 key insights, even if we've already discussed them partially, maybe just, hit us with the top 3 insights that you think would be the most valuable for a corporate AI executive.
Patience, the time frame associated with getting to that value, it's going to be different when you're dealing with AI. There's many dead ends we're going to go to, as many twists and turns in that journey. And as leaders, we need to have a little bit more patience to understand just how early we are in this journey of thinking about employing AI tools in our products and services. So have a little bit of patience. Obviously, understand there are limits to that, but patience, really important. I think watching how users interact with the products or services that are emerging for leaders, super valuable, right? We want to get those leaders in an environment where they're building empathy with the challenge of using AI in the real world, right? Like ivory tower, stuck in the office and imagining how good or bad the product is from a user experience perspective, but not actually seeing, and in many cases, not experiencing for themselves exactly what that workflow looks like. Really critical. Get leaders to observe users. And I've seen that when teams are doing interviews and they are engaging with customers, showing the videos of those experiences to leaders in report outs. Super important, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, I understand why there's a big challenge here and why we need to really think about this a little bit differently. Last one, just throw it out, is funding. What we preach from a lean startup perspective, metered funding. We don't want to throw a lot of resources really quickly, assuming that what we need here is just a big budget to power it home. Instead, we need to really release funding based on traction. Have we learned enough about both the product, the solution, the experience, and the business opportunity to justify releasing additional funds, growing the team, and starting to build out the overall capacity to deploy, right? We want to make sure that we don't rush because there's limited capacity to fund all of these AI opportunities that are in the backlog. And so we want to make sure we're really careful and we respond to data rather than just our own enthusiasm about what might be the next best thing for the product or the business that we're building.
That's great. So patience, empathy, and metered funding. Great way to end it. Very crisp. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really appreciate your time today.
All right. Great chatting with you, Ben. See you soon.
Thank you. The Lean AI podcast is brought to you by Lean Startup Co. To find out more about our Lean AI approach to generating more AI wins with far less wasted time and investment, including our training workshops, pilot programs, and full implementation offerings, visit us at www.leanstartup.co. Search the Lean AI podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Lean Startup Co., thanks for listening and sharing with your colleagues and friends if you found this episode insightful.